So how does it work? Pretty much, it's pretty obvious. Almost anything that you can get that you might want to use that you could get under full copyright, you will be able to get an equivalent under Creative Commons. So with this one, you could write to the Sydney Morning Herald, ask them for permission to use this in your competition. We're going to talk about it like we're doing a competition video because that's a nice, obvious public thing where you're going beyond the classroom. Video for a competition. You want to have a picture of the Eiffel Tower in it. You could write to Sydney Morning Herald. You could ask their permission. You could wait for them to approve that. You could then, they would send you back how much they want you to pay. You would write back to them and pay them that money, and then you would have permission to use it in the ways that they've said in the license. Or else you could go to Flickr and there would be a photo sitting right there with a license already on it that says you can use it in these ways. And this one is under the broadest license, attribution only, so you can use it for commercial purposes. Yeah, so all nice and easy. This is the idea. So what are the actual licenses? Oh, any questions type thing about generics? We'll talk about the actual licenses. No? Cool. So the actual licenses are basically made up, I said there's 6 licenses, and they're all made up of 4 standard elements. So it sounds complex, but it's not, I swear. Basically, attribution, you saw them in the film. So you've got attribution, which, is just about attributing the original authors. That's nice and easy. Non-commercial, also pretty straightforward. Just don't use it for commercial purposes. For your information, non-profit school use is almost certainly a non-commercial purpose. So you guys, almost anything that you guys want to do with it will probably be covered, unless you start involving third-party sponsors or something like that. So if you're putting big ads for Coke on your yearbook that you want to use the photos in, and you're putting a big ad for Coke right next to the photos, maybe you're, stepping beyond, Creative Commons, the non-commercial thing. But that's okay, because you can just use material that you can use commercially. So attribution, non-commercial, no derivatives. That means you can't change the work. You have to keep it exactly the same way. That's for people who really like their work and believe in the integrity of it and that kind of thing. And share alike, that's probably the most complex one. And that's the one that says, basically, you can remix this as much as you like, and as long as you put the same license on the new material. So any new works that you create have to be under exactly the same license. And people often get that wrong in that they'll put it under another license with share alike in it, so another similar license, but it won't be the same license. And that's the thing to remember. It has to be exactly the same one. And so you want to be careful when you're using share alike material. You have to be aware right from the start that if you want to use that piece of material, you're going to have to put your final product out under a Creative Commons license. So you want to think about that. So people mix and match these 4 elements to create 6 licenses. So that sounds confusing, but if you look at the license, you can see how it's all pretty simple. Each of the licenses has 1, 2, or 3 of those things on it. And, they're the restrictions. So you can use your material in absolutely any way you like, except for whichever of those restrictions is in the license. So the broadest license is obviously attribution. That's the one where you can do anything you want as long as you attribute the author. It's great. This is the license I use for my material because obviously I'm a researcher. I don't have any other reasons for doing my material except putting it out there. So it's the one I use, but it's also the one I normally use when I'm using stuff just because it's the simplest. You don't have to worry about that whole, is my use commercial or not? Are there going to be ads? That kind of thing, if you're using attribution-only stuff. Last year, Virgin Mobile did a big advertising campaign that went on billboards all across Australia and up on websites and all this kind of thing that was made up entirely of photos taken from Flickr under attribution-only licenses. So it was, I don't know if any of you saw it, it's the one where they were like insulting people. So they'd have like a photo of somebody talking in a lift and the caption would be, people who talk in lifts have bad breath. Are you with us or not? And there was a whole pile of these things, and Virgin did it completely legally, probably, because it was all under the attribution-only license. So that's how broad it is. The tightest one, which we've already talked about, attribution non-commercial, no derivatives, can't do very much. Notice there's things like attribution non-commercial. So you can change that stuff, even though it doesn't have the explicit share-alike one that talks about changing. It doesn't say you can't change it, therefore you can. So that's one thing that people often get wrong. And these are the 2 that people sometimes mix up. If you're using attribution share-alike material, you have to put your own material out under attribution share-alike. If you're using attribution non-commercial share-alike material, then you have to put it out. And so you can't mix material under those two licenses into the same video. That's the problem we were talking about before. So you can't get an attribution non-commercial share-alike song and an attribution share-alike photo and put them in the same video. It's just impossible, legally. And this one's kind of becoming the default education license. A lot of people in the education sector are using this one. So there's a lot of materials out there under attribution non-commercial share-alike that you guys can use. So there you go. And, oh yeah, so as you can see, all of them have a lovely little button associated with them. Ideally, when it's on the web page that you want to use stuff, they'll have this button which indicates, exactly how you can use and which license it's under. It might not. Sometimes it might be like I did in a bad example up here, where they've just written and they've got a link through. But hopefully, and sometimes it'll just have the name of the license, in which case you'll have to go to the website. But in theory, it should always have a link next to it. And these buttons are normally links if they're embedded properly into the website. So you click on the button or you click on the link, whatever you have, and it takes you to the license deed. So this is one of those things I was talking about that's all about making it nice and easy to use. And you can see it says you are free to share and remix the stuff as long as you attribute non-commercial share alike. So it's all written out really simply in one page about what you can and can't do. And if you click down here, it says the legal code, you get taken through to the full license, which looks like this and goes for about 7 pages and is much harder to understand. I would still nevertheless encourage you, especially if you're going to use the licenses, to have a bit of a look at it and that kind of thing, because obviously I would never encourage you to use a license that you haven't read. But most people basically won't go beyond the license deed, and it's designed to give you a good summary that will let you know what you can and can't, nice and simply, with the license, do with the material and that kind of thing.
But it's a really good teaching point, I think, for students to show that, once you start using Creative Commons, there may be a tendency to not treat the attribution so seriously, I suppose, or give them less weight than they really deserve. So by taking students through to that, to that other documentation, even if they don't read it, at least
can see it's legal.
Can see that there's some genuine, hard-hitting legal stuff behind these licenses, and they deserve to be treated very seriously.
And that is one thing to remember. The students might start to, it's very tempting to, once you start seeing Creative Commons stuff, to kind of treat it like it's in the public domain. Like, you can do absolutely anything with it. And that kind of, undermines the whole point of Creative Commons and that kind of thing. So it is still important always to check what the license says, which license is under, make sure you're obeying it. And attribution in particular is one that gets left off all the time. Even I am guilty of sometimes not attributing, because it's so easy to cut and paste something, and and it takes an extra 5 minutes to write down who wrote it and stuff like that. So I really encourage people to try to get attribution built into their kids from the start. And the best way to do that is obviously to say, how would you feel if Coke used your song in an ad without putting your name on it? That kind of thing.